Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about emotions in relationships because you know what? We have to dive deeper into our emotions. So, I had to bring Ed back. You know what I mean? We had such a great time our first round where I was like, you know what, Ed, come back here. Let me pick your brain some more. So, now we're here for round two, thinking about how we can use our emotions to help our relationships. So, thank you so much, Ed. I have to just ask you right away, when did you realize that understanding your emotions can help you in the other relationships in your life?
Well, I don't know if we talked about in our last interview how I became the emotions doctor.
Yeah.
We
Hmm.
did. Okay, and how I got into emotions and how they called me a non-drinking alcoholic when I was doing my internship.
Yeah.
When I when I started to look at emotions for the young women I was working with, I had two problems, Mitzi. One was I had to help them understand what they were going through and dealing with their own stuff.
Yeah.
The crimes they had committed, the abuse they had endured, and all of that. But I also realized that they had to be able to interact with the correctional staff, and they didn't know how to do that. On the other side of that coin, I had to help the staff do the same thing. I had to help these jaded correctional staff learn how to deal with their own emotions and how to deal with the emotions of the young women that they were held responsible for managing and helping and working with. And so I realized that, excuse me, I got a little bit of a tickle in my throat. I had I realized that it was the same side, two sides of the same coin. When you understand what emotions are, that they alert us to how we see the environment and prepare us to deal with what's going on. When you understand that, you then can take the next step, which is to say, if I'm experiencing anger, and anger tells me that I perceive a threat, if somebody else is directing their anger at me, then they must be perceiving me as a threat. So it's the same issue. It's the emotion is what it is, anger in this case. The message of the emotion is I perceive a threat. If it's my anger, then I have to stop and assess the nature of the threat that I perceive. If it's somebody else's anger, then I have to ask, okay, wait a minute. They perceive me as a threat. What's going on here? It doesn't mean that I am a threat. It means that they perceive me as a threat. So then I need to stop, take a breath, take a step back, and ask them questions. What is it about me that is troubling you? And so when I understand that in the context of a relationship, instead of me reacting to their anger at me and then escalating and it getting out of hand, I then can use my information and my knowledge about emotions to understand and assess what's going on between me and the other person. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. It makes sense. It makes sense because you you basically you're reflecting on it. You know what I mean? And while you were going through this, I was putting in my own context because well, married people they get into arguments, and
Yeah, they do.
one of my biggest things that my husband always says is like, well, it was. I don't care about your intentions. Your intentions can be as good as they want, but if it doesn't come out the way that I can understand it and perceive it, then I'm not going to receive it in that manner. You know what I mean? And it's like, but my intentions, listen to my intentions. My intentions wasn't to hurt you. But it's like it's kind of like you said, you have to receive that information and just take it in and be like, it's more than just the intentions. It's more than just what you project out. It's the tone, it's your body language, it's your eyes, are they looking directly at me? Like people don't realize that when it comes to emotions, everything, everything outside of you affects that.
That's true. And there's a couple other things here. First of all, when we think of relationships, we think of it in terms of 50-50. I'll
Hmm.
do my 50% and you do your 50%. And that's great if that works. But if you have somebody like your husband, for example, who maybe see the world differently, and I'll talk about that in a minute, then you may have to go a little bit farther to accommodate him and where he is at relative to you. You may have to help him help you interact with him.
Can you say that again? Say that
I
part
will.
again.
You may have to help him
Uh-huh.
help you
Help me
interact
interact
with it.
with.
Um, help him help you interact with him. Now, what I mean by that
Okay.
is this: he may not be able to give you the information that you need in order to help him move and you move further in your relationship. So you may have to help him learn to how to interact with you in a better way so that the two of you can move forward in your relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So basically helping him understand the way that I talk, help him understand the word, the verbiage that I choose and what I'm used to and things like that, right?
Exactly. Now, there's a basic relationship rule. And the basic relationship rule says that everybody in every situation does the best they can, not the best possible, but the best they can, given two things. One is their model of the world, how they understand what's going on, and their skill sets, what they are able to do in terms of dealing with emotions, dealing with their own stuff, and dealing with you in that situation. So let me break that down for you. When you're dealing with your husband, for example, he has a model of the world. He has an understanding of what's going on between you and him in that situation. It doesn't mean that the model is correct, but it's his model. And in
Correct.
order for you to understand what's going on with him, you have to understand his model. This is where you may have to go more than 50% in terms of questioning and understanding him, saying, "What's going on, dear? What's happening with you? How do you understand what's going on right now? How do you see it?
Hmm.
What's your understanding of what's going on between you and me in this situation?" That's his model of the world. Now, the second part is his skill set. He may not be very good at dealing with emotions, or he may say, I want everything the best for my wife, and I just don't know how to give it to her. I don't know how to deal with her when she's upset. I don't know, and so forth. So you may have to help him learn how to deal with you. That's his skill set. So if you
And
understand his model, how he sees the situation, and what he's capable of doing in that situation, now you've got it covered, and you can help him help you move the relationship forward. Does
mm,
that make sense?
it makes sense. It's interesting. It is interesting. Do you think that this type of model works for older generations and newer generations in things of that nature for anyone really, not just for husband and wife? You know what I'm saying? Like a grandparent dealing with a grandchild for that's in their teens and they're trying to understand them and their verbiage. Is that the same type of model that you would implement for that case as well? And just having
Oh,
that understanding? Because it seems like it's
absolutely.
pretty transferable with any type of relationship.
It is. When my mom died, I was in graduate school, and my dad was crying, and he was apologizing to me for crying. Now, his wife of 50 years had just died. This is many years ago, and he was apologizing to me. Well, I needed to understand that in his generation, for a man to express emotions was not acceptable. That's his model. And his skill set was he didn't know how to deal with it. So he was just reacting in a normal way. So I had to help him understand that his wife had just died. And what he was feeling was very normal and appropriate, despite what he'd been told growing up. So he needed to just express it and go with it and get through it. So, yeah, it does apply. Now, in terms of grandparents dealing with teenagers, their model probably is once you understand it, I don't understand this kid. He's just being crazy and doing stupid stuff. What am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
So if you then help the grandparent understand that teenagers do what they do, you need to give them some space, understand where they're coming from as best you can, and then interact with them the best you can.
There you go. But so I guess is there a real way to use your emotions as a tool to, I guess this is a kind of way, to answer my own question, because it sounds like this is a way to win an argument, you know what I mean? By basically putting yourself in their shoes to understand where they're coming from. Is that right?
It is, but I would put a caveat in there. Do you really what does it mean to win the argument?
Pride, ego.
Pride, yes. Okay, so but if you may win the argument and negatively impact the relationship.
That's true.
So you want to think about what's winning. Let me give you another example in terms of working with people, and it applies to a relationship. Let's say you and I now are interlocked, our hands are interlocked,
Hmm.
and I want to get you into a corner of the room, figuratively speaking. But I want to get you into the corner of the room because it's good for you and it's good for me. If I push you into the corner of the room because it's only good for me, I'm manipulating you. I may win the argument by getting you in that corner, but once you realize you're in the corner, you're going to be pissed off at me for being there.
Yeah,
You with me?
I'm with you.
Okay, but our hands are interlocked. So
Okay.
now with my questions, I'm going to let you push me into the corner.
Okay.
Now we're in the corner where you and I both need to be, but you have pushed me into the corner. So now we're there and it's benefiting both of us, but you're not angry with me because you're in the corner. So, in
Because we're
terms of the
both in the corner.
argument, I've helped you understand what's going on. I've helped you see it from my point of view. So now we're both on the same page and you're not pissed off with me. Have I won the argument? Yeah, I have, but not in a way which is going to piss you off.
I like that. I like that very much. And I guess my next question is when people vent, and when people try to vent to other people just to tell them about the day, maybe complaints, may just be bad, whatever situation. One of the biggest things I hear is that, oh, you're just supposed to be silent. Just listen. But a lot of the times people give back advice, people give back encouragement, but then the other person is not receiving it. I mean, where is that line of venting to someone or being the person who's being vented to, both ends, I guess you can say, where it doesn't lead into something else. You know what I'm saying? Because when you vent to someone, it can lead, where they're just either complaining and then that's it. The receiver doesn't really actually receive what they're taking, what they're hearing, because all they're hearing is complaints and then they shut them down. You know what I mean? And they just stay silent. Or the receiver would usually, because I see this a lot and I see this within myself and I see this a lot with a lot of people. So, I'm kind of taking notes. So that's why I was just like, let me talk to you about this. So, so one of the things, that's the thing that's like, where's that line where it's like, it's a good period to be in that I guess it's offense. I don't know. But in my mind, it's offense where it's like you're being a good listener and you're also venting and we're letting everything out, but it's not where you're getting a misperception on both ends. Like, is that a thing? Is there a way to have that grace, that equal grace, or is that not a thing?
No, it is. It depends
Okay.
on whether are you the ventor or the ventee. In other words, are you the one who's venting or are you the one who's being vented on?
For this situation, I would say I'll be the one vented on. So I'm the one
Okay.
that's listening, and I happen to, let's say, instead of just listening, I stop them and I give them encouraging words, or I give them my perspective, and they don't receive it or anything like that. Let's say that.
Okay. As a general rule, Mitzi, when you're in that situation,
Not me.
as a general, when you're in that situation, remember the relationship rule, and that is that people are doing the best they can, given their model of the world and their skill sets. So let's put the skill sets aside for a minute. Let's just talk about their model of the world. You want to understand how they see what's going on. So if they're venting to you and you have the time to one, listen to them and the desire to listen to them, then fine. Before you make an intervention, you might ask them, do you want to hear how I see what's going on? Do you want input from me? Or do you just want me to listen? And see, when you do that now, instead of giving them advice, and they may not want advice, they may just want you to sit there and listen. So you ask them, and they'll tell you, no, I really don't want advice at this point. I just really want to kind of talk my stuff out and see where it goes. Cool. Then I'll just sit and listen.
Okay. I
So
like
you
that.
say, so you ask for you're asking what they want. You're not necessarily asking for permission, but you're saying, well, I want to know what you want from me in this situation. So because you're important to me, I can then provide that to you.
So I guess it would be important that if somebody's just initially like, because I know my mom does this sometimes where she'll just call me and then automatically start venting. And I don't know if it's venting or what's going on, but now after the years, I'm realizing how her rhythm is and her routines are and all that stuff. So for me, I understand her mode of the way of being. So it's like if I didn't know her and she was just to call and just start venting, I mean, do I just stop her midway and be like, hey, you want my advice or do you just want me to continue on listening? Or do you
Okay, and
just not ask that question midway? Is that rude? I mean,
right. No, what I would do is I would listen to the energy in her voice. And what I mean
that's
by
good.
that, if
Yeah.
if if it's high energy, then I would wait until that energy level drops enough so that you could then can say, I hear what you're saying, Mom. How can I help?
Yeah.
And see, when you say, how can I help? She may say, well, you really can't. You just need to listen to me or whatever. So you
Mm-hmm.
say, how can I help? That gives them the opportunity to say, I don't need any help, or I need this, or I need that.
Yeah.
It's
I
just,
see what you're saying.
it's a very generic kind of intervention when you say, how can I help?
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. And it takes away, I feel like that takes away pressure on the person, the ventee, because now you're no longer the bad guy because you seem sincere
Mhm.
and you seem like you're actually concerned about this person, whoever it may be, you know, that's a good way to look at it. Thank you.
You've heard the term mansplaining.
I have.
And this is the stereotypical view of a man. A man says, okay, I gotta, if she's saying things to me, I've got to fix it. So if I've got to fix it, I'm going to give all this advice. And the woman is saying, I don't want your advice. I just want you to listen. So,
Yeah.
so in order to avoid mansplaining, I will say, how can I help? And if my
How
wife
can
wants an explanation, then she'll say, well, I need you to give me some how you see it or whatever she says. Or she may say, I just want you to listen.
mm-hmm.
But I wait until the energy level drops to a point where she then can hear what I have to say, or the other person can hear what I have to say.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So when I usually go through quotes and I post quotes constantly. And I came across this quote, and I think it's very relevant to what our topic in hand and just exactly what you said. So I really want to know your thoughts on it. The quote goes, you use anger, sadness, depression as tools for one's progression, not for others. So what are your thoughts on that? Because that
Yeah,
one kind of threw me off a little bit, but I wanted to know from your perspective.
read it again, Mitzi.
Yeah, not a problem. It said the quote says, use anger, sadness, depression as tools for one own's progression, not for others.
Okay, it sounds like the the writer, is basically saying that he or she is only using his emotions in order to help him move forward, and that the person with whom he's interacting or the situation is unimportant.
Hmm,
That's
that's
how
interesting.
that's what it sounds like to me.
Hmm,
And in a world where I only exist and I don't have to think of other people, and I can't imagine that kind of world, because if I'm angry, unless I'm angry at myself, or I'm angry at the situation, or I'm angry at my computer because it doesn't do what I want it to do, that's my anger, and I have to take responsibility for and learn to master that.
yeah,
But in most cases, emotions are interpersonal. They exist between people. And in
Yeah.
that kind of case, I need to then master my emotions in the context of my interactions with another person. And that's usually where it's going to happen. And that's what
Hmm.
we were talking about earlier in terms of mastering your emotions in furthering your relationship.
Yeah, it does. Look at that. I like the way that you put it, but yeah, we don't live in a single minded world like you're not alone on an island. I mean, and if you are alone on an island, well, then you're alone dealing with your own emotions and your own problems. But in reality, I mean, most of us is interacting and dealing with other human beings and other individuals continuously, so it's kind of hard to not consider other people's emotions sometimes.
Exactly. And sometimes, by the way, you're going to have to master your emotion and deal with a situation without, how do I want to put this? In spite of the other person. Now, what I mean by that is that if somebody is in a work setting, for example, somebody's a boss is taking advantage of you, and you can't change that boss directly. And you may not be able to deal directly with their emotions, but you can deal with your own emotions and you can take action, perhaps in an indirect way, to deal with a situation without necessarily confronting the boss.
Okay.
So, well, this came up years ago when I think I mentioned I went onto the LinkedIn forum for women and said, "What happens to you when you express emotion?" And 2,000 women came back and said, "I get demeaned, I get marginalized, I get put down." And so my suggestion to them was this: if you have a boss that is abusing you in some way, taking advantage of you, and you're angry at that, you can't express your anger directly because there will be consequences for that. But
Right.
you can use the energy of your anger to develop a plan to indirectly get around this boss, dealing with HR, educating the boss, whatever it is you have to do to protect yourself without necessarily changing the boss, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, because a lot of the times when you're working for a company, you can't really change your boss. You know what I mean? You can't
You
ask for a
can't.
new supervisor. You can't ask for a new manager. It doesn't work like that. You have to learn how you said to work around it and use those emotions to change the way you either see the situation, change the way that you're taking it in from other people. I mean, it all comes down to your perspective. It really does. That's really
Mhm.
good. That's a really good point. So I have one more quote before the show ends because this one was a good one too. And it's kind of tricky because I don't know. Let me just say it.
Lay it
So
out there.
the quote is, silence can be a powerful tool when words fail to capture the intensity of our feelings. Hmm. And would you like for me to say it again?
Yes.
One more time for the people in the back. Silence can be a powerful tool when words fail to capture the intensity of our feelings. And that's a tricky quote. Because
Yes.
in my mind, I perceive it like, but you can use silence as a form of manipulation. So no matter what type of intensity you're feeling inside, if you really want to, if you're going in the negative side of, you can really try to use that silence as a manipulation instead. But I would love to hear your perspective on that.
You can. And silence, if you're using silence because the other person can't handle it, then what you're doing is you're basically punishing the other person by not saying anything and pretty much taking yourself out of the situation. But if you use silence as an opportunity for the situation to progress, if you will, or just kind of sit in the moment and let things happen, then silence can be very effective. If
Hmm.
you take what's called a pregnant pause and just let
Pregnant pause. What is
a,
that? What do you mean by that?
what I mean by that is a pause that's filled with meaning.
That's so deep.
Instead,
I like that.
yeah, instead of figuring you have to fill the moment with words, you just use silence to emphasize that there's something going on in the situation that we need to think about, we need to contemplate, and we just need to let kind of sit there until we can get a handle on it.
Yeah.
But you don't want to, you want to keep that pause time limited. You don't want to let it go on for an hour. You don't want to give someone the silent treatment.
Yeah.
That then is used to manipulate. But
Yeah.
if the silence says, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, we need to let it sit, we need to let it marinate, and we need to consider what's going on so we then can move forward.
Yeah. I
Then
like
the,
that a
then the
lot.
pause becomes productive rather than manipulative, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It makes a lot more sense. You gave me the clarity that I needed for that one because it kind of stuck me in one direction versus it's like, oh, what way could it really be productive? But then when you put it in that aspect, I mean, in that context, you made me realize like I've done that. I had to be in situations, be in rooms, be around people where I had to just sit in silence to observe the situation for really what it was, or sit in silence because I couldn't express myself, you know what I mean? Or because of lack of words, you know what I mean? Because I was just either so excited and just staying quiet was just easier to control myself, or just there's too many people going around, there's too much talking. So staying quiet keeps me from getting a panic attack and getting my anxiety all over the place. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It can be productive depending on the context of the situation and the way that you're trying to use it. So I really appreciate that perspective shift that you just given me because it really does put things into perspective. Like, how am I really using my emotions right now? You know what I mean? And I think that's a good question just to ask in general. Like, how am I using my emotions right now?
Oh, absolutely. And if you think of the emotional process, Mitzi, we talked about this last time.
Mhm.
The emotional process, the emotion cycle is that you are constantly scanning your environment, unconscious or subconsciously. You then perceive what's going on, your body reacts, and when your body reacts, you then take a deep breath and you take a step back from the situation so that you can assess what's going on. Well, taking a deep breath is like using that moment of silence. You're taking a deep breath and you're asking what's going on, going inside yourself to say, what am I reacting to? What's happening within me? And what's going on outside of me that I need to understand and assess and make a decision about. So that's another use of silence if you think of it that way.
That's
And
true.
you may have to do that several times. If you're in a relationship or you're in an argument or whatever, you may have to then stop and take a deep breath, take a
Mhm.
moment of silence, and assess what's happening within you and outside of you in order for you to make a decision that's in your best interest.
Exactly. And I think once you take that moment of silence just to reflect, it helps you really consider, like how we said in the beginning, that mode of understanding. Where is your partner thinking of? How do they perceive things? How do they understand the situation for what it is? It gives you that moment to consider their feelings. So it's just, that is very, very good point. So thank you so much. You made so many great points. I'm so glad that we got to have you back on the show to really talk about this and dive deeper into more so in relationships because let's be honest, we deal with relationships continuously. Like we said, with our grandparents, with our grandchildren, with our own children, like we were talking about before the show. You know what I mean? With our significant others, with teachers, with coworkers, with your bosses. I mean, we are constantly in community with other people, and we have to regulate our emotions and really understand what's going on within them. So thank you for this. Thank you. And to really start wrapping up the show, what can be some lasting words of wisdom you can give us all?
Okay, we want to master our emotions. Okay,
Mm.
and the other thing, we want to understand what a definition of success is. Success is not reaching a goal. If that happens, and it will, that's great. Success is falling down X times and getting up Y times where Y is greater than X, meaning you're going to fall down, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to get things wrong. The important point is to get back up and keep trying until you learn how to do what you want to do and get to where you want to go. So everything that we've been talking about is your folks are going to try it and they're going to fall flat flat on their face at times and things aren't going to go right. So you take a step back, you reassess, and then you move forward. So keep trying and practicing what we've talked about until you get where you want to be.
Yeah. Until it becomes second nature, and then you don't even realize that you're taking a moment to breathe. It just becomes like, okay, I'm ready, without you even realizing it, and I think that's a beautiful thing. That's my goal. That's my goal, to be honest, especially with my husband. Goodness. But
And just understand, I'm an expert on this stuff and I still screw up. I'm
oh,
still
thank
learning.
you. Thank you for telling me you screw up too, because that helps me a lot. That warms my heart, just because it makes me realize, like, you know what? Everyone, even someone like yourself who writes blogs and books and who's
Yes.
considered to be an
Yes.
expert, you know what I mean? Even you can be so humble with your own emotions. You know what I mean? Your emotions can truly humble us sometimes, and I appreciate that. I really do
I'm still
appreciate you
learning.
being honest, right? I know. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, it's okay to mess up. It's just about keep going, moving forward, and keep trying. You know what I mean? When you stop, I mean, that's when we got a problem. So don't stop. Keep going. Always keep thinking, y'all. Bye.